how sports and esports differ from region to region.
On behalf of everyone on stage, thank you for attending. And let's do a quick introduction, I believe. So my name is Koryun. I represent EveryMatrix, which is a full turnkey iGaming provider.
My name's Jamie Nettleton. I'm a partner of the law firm Addisons in Sydney. I'm a gambling law partner. I've also given a fair bit of advice in respect of esports and the interaction with gambling. And I was previously the president of the International Masters of Gaming Law and looked at these issues on an international basis.
Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Jaydeep. So I've been in the industry for many years now, and I'm working as a consultant for the Indian market, and I also help in payments in emerging markets.
Hi, Marek, Suchar, co-founder and managing director of partnerships at ODGG. We are leading esports auspicious management and iframe provider, working with multiple both B2Bs and B2Cs globally. So esports is mostly our topic where we can provide our clients with the end-to-end solutions for their needs.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Justin Nichole Dugeno. Esports. I'm an owner of an esports organization called Reborn Booky. So we're one of the top competing organizations here in the Philippines, and also the marketing manager of Magicraft, which is a Web2 based game.
Thank you, everyone. So we had a wonderful panel about esports previously, and continuing the topic, the first question would be, what do you think, how esports actually differs from one region to another region, and what do operators and companies need to keep in mind to be successful within multiple regions?
Look, I think one has to look at it, as you rightly say, from country to country because of the different treatment. If we come down to the fore, it is not a traditional sport. And obviously, it's a matter of actually look at the similarities and how it may fit into that category. It's particularly relevant in my country due to the recognition that's given to sports, both from an educational perspective, a government funding perspective, and also a general recognition in respect of the status. So, and at least as far as Australia is concerned, it is not yet recognised as a formal sport.
So I can speak about the South Asian markets, and esports is definitely gaining a lot of popularity in those countries. And we have, so esports is it's there. There are a lot of players in esports. What is not allowed is betting on esports, but playing on esports is allowed. So if I am a Call of Duty player, or if I know how to play PUBG, I can make a team and I can go and play esports tournaments. There are increasingly high value tournaments being organized throughout the country. But what I cannot do is bet on which team to win and which team to lose. So that is not allowed. But there is what's happening is the government of the day also wants to promote this kind of esports kind of activity where players are competing with each other. So that is a very positive sign. And there are companies which are actually gone into the college level and even at the tier 2, tier 3 cities, and they're organizing these tournaments, which is helping to gain the mass popularity. And I think in few years' time, we will see a much more acceptance of esports in the country.
Yeah, before I guess we move into the topic of esports as such, first thing that is good to realize is esports is not just thing. Just one thing. It's similar, like if we will be speaking about sports and if we put all the ball sports into one basket. And of course, we might be speaking about tennis, we might be speaking about handball, we might be speaking about soccer. On all of that are different sports. It's similar with esports. Is it one umbrella for multiple different disciplines? We might be speaking about League of Legends, Dota 2, Counter-Strike. And because of the success of a particular game in a particular country, you will have a different attention and different viewership, different player base in the different regions. So when we are speaking about Southeast Asia, as JD started, we might be speaking mostly about Dota 2, we might be speaking about Mobile Legends. When you come to LATAM, you might be speaking mostly about League of Legends, Counter-Strike. When you go to CIS, you will be speaking mostly about Dota 2 and Counter-Strike. So each agent differs. Similarly, like when we speak about, for example, cricket, you have just 1 billion people looking at it, but at the same time, majority of the states do not even care about it, right? So you need to put those things into the context in understanding sports as well as esports.
Okay. Yeah. So for the esports sides, I think economic status of the region is one of the factors that we have in, like, for example, in the Philippines. Not everyone can afford, or not organization can afford to build a Dota 2 teams. So we only have like a few Dota 2 teams that is competing on the high tier organizations. Like, for example, the Blacklist. We have the Team Secret in the Philippines. So, but from what I can see is we have here is the Call of Duty Mobile. So it is one of the very most affordable game type, and also because of the players that can only, you guys would have, I mean, the organizations would have to invest on mobile phones. They don't have to use any PCs. Same like for the Mobile Legends, and yeah, also for I think for the fan base. So here again in the Philippines, I can it's, if you guys are familiar with Free Fire or something, it's a person shooter. It's not that popular here in the Philippines. So because there are not much of a fan here. So but here in the Philippines, the Mobile Legends is one of the top leading game. So it's also based on the fan of the an audience.
Thank you. So, from the perspective of content, how similar or different are traditional sports and esports? And also, how similar or different are the players who actually bet on traditional sports compared to esports?
Let me talk on the second part first, and it was commented on by Jaydeep. The actual participants in respect of esports obviously transcends all ages, and certainly insofar as the tournaments which I've attended, is mostly by a considerable number of people. Let's put it in the under 18 category, so those who may not be adults. This is where there starts being a dynamic that needs to be assessed in respect of the attraction of esports as an entertainment or as a sports activity in respect of the gambling sector. Whereas it's perceived to be, it's not a sport, not a contingency on which bets may be made, and it gives rise to a considerable number of challenges for two reasons. First of all, trying to distinguish the fact that esports should be treated as a sport in itself and what characteristics must it have, which we'll come on to. And secondly, by virtue of the participation of a number of underage, is that something appropriate to be a gambling product, irrespective of the policy that may be taken as to whether or not it is actually a permitted activity on which gambling can take place.
So I think, as Marek was saying, I think the content of esports changes from country to country, depending on the mobile handset availability, as Justin was saying, and I think depending on bandwidth and everything, there are different type of games which are popular in different countries. But from a sports point of view, obviously South Asian markets and South Asian diaspora, but cricket is obviously the biggest content that we see. And there is an increasingly acceptance of other sports also. For example, soccer and tennis, and there are local games like Kabaddi, which is also coming up. But cricket by far is the most consumed sports content as a content. Now, obviously, there are various reasons for it, but even as a betting business, that is where it generates most of the volume.
Yeah, absolutely. Many topics were already addressed. Beyond the betting conference, so also from the perspective of content, right? If you think about challenges of the content for bookmakers, we've seen in COVID times that actually all the content when it comes to traditional sports was pretty much shut down. There were very few competitions that were still running. So esports sort of was the one of the content options that the bookmakers had. In the time, we've seen a lot of popularity in terms of FIFA competitions, NBA 2K competitions, and other competitions. And similarly, as we are moving ahead, many of these traditional sports basically they have the content all day long, right? If you think about soccer, there are multiple different soccer leagues, there are multiple different championships. At the same time, when you think about basketball, the situation is slightly worse, but it's pretty much similar. But when it comes to cricket, we have definitely some of the seasons where the content is available, also not all the time. But at the same time, the appetite for cricket is huge, specifically in India, Pakistan, Australia, UK. So there are definitely the challenges, not challenges, the opportunities rather, that can be explored in a way of combining esports and sports, where the content from the esports angle can be created and consumed by bookmakers and by bettors that are interested in that. While if there is a gap in the content from the cricket perspective, this can be addressed.
Yeah, I actually have to agree with him about the content of, like for example, there are events in some of the gaming platforms where they implement soccer games like skins of the players. So yeah, and it actually differs again from region depending on what is the currently the most popular. For example, I'm speaking in behalf of the esports. So in the content side, companies usually try to research first on what is the most like popular depending on the audience, then they would just put it in and implement it on game. So
One of the biggest, if not the biggest event that kind of reshaped the betting industry was COVID. So, what were the new tendencies that COVID brought to the industry? And did these tendencies still stick after the pre-COVID times, post-COVID times, right?
I think one of the things that we saw was obviously because there was no live sports, so a lot of live or esports type of games which were played online became quite popular. But also you had a lot of virtual games based on actual sports. They became quite popular in those days. And one of the category I think in at least in certain markets that we saw where earlier casino was probably not as popular as sports, but casino kind of picked it up a lot because live sports was not available. So I think during COVID we saw that a lot. And I think now, obviously, now that live sports is back, players are back, but that doesn't mean that the acceptance of casino or other type of fantasy or virtual games that was there have come down. I think that is still there because sports is like Mary was saying, seasonal, and though you do have lot of leagues, lot of games happening all the time, but players usually will have some preference on where they want to place a bet. So I think now that whenever there is a gap and whenever there is not a live game that they are betting, they are finding this other avenues or other mode of entertainment within that platform which is available, like casino, like virtual, etc.
I think esports was affected to a degree during COVID because of the lack of tournaments that could take place from a physical perspective. So, insofar as that is the generator for a number of the local interests, whether in my country or other countries, that obviously was affected. What it actually did was for the actual suppliers of the esports, it gave rise to a much broader audience than had previously been the case, partly because there was a lack of other available content. But what's certainly become apparent now in the post-COVID era is the control which is exercisable by the suppliers of that content. And it's the necessity for them to ensure two things. First of all, that the products which they are actually supplying are truly skill-based concepts and don't somehow become recognised as a gambling product in respect of certain jurisdictions, which has certainly been the perception from a number of gambling regulators I've spoken to. And secondly, that to ensure they retain the respect and the integrity that's associated, that appropriate standards are put in place to maintain the integrity associated with esports is absolutely key to the success and to the widespread recognition as being a reputable activity.
It's a very great question when it comes to COVID. There is a huge misconception of the betting industry that esports skyrocketed during COVID. Yes and no. During the COVID, esports continued to do very well when it comes to core esports like League of Legends, Counter-Strike, Dota 2. People stayed at home, they watched more, they played more. So of course, there was a growth of core esports itself, but it was a continual growth that continued. But there was a second part of the picture that actually started to be very, very proactive in terms of volume, in terms of growth, and this was something that we called eSims, e-simulators, like FIFA, NBA 2K. Because there was no content, this content was replaced by these games where it's hard to understand Dota 2. You know that, right? I'm Dota 2 player myself. So it is hard to understand Dota 2, but if you look at FIFA match, at NBA 2K match, you know exactly what is happening there. It's 2 people playing, not 22 people playing, but at the same time you do understand what's going on. So instead of watching real Chelsea and Arsenal, you will watch Chelsea and Arsenal played as a FIFA match. But you know what's going on, you can bet on it. But you will not go to Counter-Strike, League of Legends, or Dota 2. And this particular industry skyrocketed. But as it skyrocketed, there was a significant decrease once the COVID was actually over. And even though this volume remained stable for the operators, it is a meaningful volume for them. And for many of them, it stays 5 to 10% of the sportsbook. It is not 60, 70% of the sportsbook anymore because the content came back, the traditional sportsbook content. But at the same time, because of this and because of this plurality of those 2 esports verticals, there is a huge misconception that when COVID was over, esports basically dropped. Esports didn't drop. Esims dropped, still to a meaningful value for operators, but esports, traditional core esports, continue to grow as there is still an audience, still a content, and there was not that much impact on that before and after the COVID.
Yeah, first I have to agree with the Dota 2 thing because you have to. It will take you like months before you could basically know all the basics and those stuffs. Well, in regarding about the COVID one, I think it was also a break here in the Philippines. I mean, esports skyrocketed during the time here in the Asia, or maybe I can just say Philippines. That's why there were so on the COVID times there were so starting organizations because they saw the opportunity that most of the audience, most of the kids watching the streams, the people are all at home. They are just on their mobiles. So there are actually a lot of tournaments that occurred here in the Philippines, online tournaments. There are a lot of organizations that wanted to try to boost their names, their faces by putting like 10,000 pesos tournament just to gain the viewers because yeah again they saw the opportunity that there will be a lot of viewers during the COVID times.
I'm a League of Legends player myself, so I can completely relate to what you're saying. I understand for someone who has never played the game, I can understand how complicated it might seem. So there will be no interest in betting in it compared to eSims. Great. Now, one of the biggest reasons why sports betting differs from region to region are regulatory requirements. So, for a very simple example is there are certain jurisdictions where players are not allowed to make a single bet. They have to bet on multiple events. So, what are the biggest ways the regulatory requirements shapes the sports betting tendencies in different regions, including Asia or South Asia?
Well, I think we need to talk about this from a jurisdiction to jurisdiction perspective. In a market that's fairly developed in respect of gambling regulation, there is an initial challenge in respect of esports as to whether or not it actually was a contingency on which bets could be made. It wasn't a traditional sport, but it was recognised that it was going to attract interest. Is it better just to leave it alone, which therefore means betting activity is not allowed at all? And indeed, must it be expressly prohibited? And in some jurisdictions, it is expressly prohibited. Yet in other jurisdictions, it was much more of an open sweep where it was permitted, but it was perceived that there were risks involved by allowing a widespread range of events, esports events, on which betting could be taken. And it was limited to those events, whether it be in respect of the Sims events or whether it be in respect of sports events, which had in place stringent integrity procedures, not just in respect of the games themselves to ensure that the outcomes could not be manipulated, but also by virtue of the players and whether or not they were actually understood the rules involved in respect of making any form of gain from gambling activity. And that actually is the real challenge in respect of esports and betting.
I think just carrying on from there, I think, see, there are a lot of markets where it's still not regulated. So in those kind of markets, which is an unregulated market, I think the betting patterns differs, and they are more dependent on the players' preferences than regulatory requirements. So, for example, at least in South Asian markets, what we see is that is traditionally there has been a big focus on exchanges, betting exchanges, and that's how the industry grew in the early days. And still there is a huge volume that goes in betting exchanges. But in last few years, what we have seen is that is there is an increasingly acceptance of sportsbook. Now, brands like Bet365, Betway, they are operating in the market, and there is a new genre of players who are more sportsbook players. So they are more into sports betting. Then we obviously see as a parallel to that as acceptance of casino also, which was online casino, which was not existent. Like probably 10, 12 years ago, there was no online casino. So that kind of an acceptance that is there and preference that is more comes from a player preferences than a regulatory requirements.
Well, absolutely, like regulation plays a huge role in our industry, and we are on the B2B side, so we are relatively fine. We are providing the odds, so we don't need the license in most of the jurisdictions. But outside of Asia, the other example might be just US and PASPA, right? We can see what is happening there, how the market is pretty much booming. So these kind of things we can potentially expect in Brazil, or we can potentially expect, hopefully, at some point in time in Asia as well. So we'll see how that will be going. There are a lot of questions and discussions around India, so we'll see there. So absolutely, this is something we need to consider. At the same time, there is a sort of different perception of esports and sports in many of the jurisdictions, where we can mention Germany and France, for example, where definitely sports betting is available in some of those, but esports is not considered a sport, so the betting is not available. While we started the discussion whether esports is actually a sport, and I guess all the panelists can agree it is. So this is some of the things that regulators also themselves should start to probably better understand, because I don't think that there is necessarily the thing that they would be against it if they understand it properly.
Yeah, regulation and support from the government is one of the plays a big role in the mostly. Especially in the esports one. So it's just been recently here. For this country that it's been the esports side has been supported like 2 years or yeah. There were teams that weren't able to fly out to compete for different tournaments. So I think yeah, support from the government as well is plays a very big role, so that organizations can just compete on top tier on different countries with top tier tournaments.
This year we have seen some major football stars, including Ronaldo or Messi, leave top European leagues and move to MLS or Saudi League specifically. Do you think these tendencies in football transfers would also affect the betting volumes of certain leagues? Will some leagues have decreasing turnover, or others would have an increase? Would this somehow shape what leagues are more popular for the players to bet on?
Well, the short answer is yes, but I think it's more a matter of what's the objective in respect of the Saudi leagues signing on players like Ronaldo and seeking to Messi. Even though in respect of the global sports books, they would probably include some of the Saudi events to actually be a betting contingency. I'm not sure that that would necessarily be appreciated by the Saudi league itself for cultural reasons. I think what it does give rise to is the potential exposure of the Saudi leagues to a broader audience, including through esports and the sports leagues, because absolutely that would not even have been considered as being a potential provider of content. And now, of course, having Ronaldo and Messi absolutely far more attractive.
No, definitely. I think with those big stars coming to these leagues, that popularity of those leagues will definitely increase, and people will always find a way to bet on those leagues. But I think in a more European context, where betting and gambling is more accepted, I think you will see those kind of leagues still enjoying the same kind of level of activity, betting activity, but with events in like in Middle East or some other countries where gambling may not be that well accepted. I think again most of those business will probably be in unregulated space.
Yeah, I was told that Americans do not like soccer because it's too slow. So we'll see whether Messi can be quicker.
Yeah,
We want more cricket and tennis type of games, right? You can bet on every ball, every hand. Yeah.
one thing is for sure though, Messi and come again, Cristiano really affects like have a big effect in the influence side. So I think I mean even Cristiano once dropped a market just for some interviews. So
Thank you, everyone. We are actually out of time. So once again, thanks for attendance. I hope you liked it. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to approach any of the panelists and ask them. We will be around. We will stick here. So, thank you.